What's going on, boys and squirrels? Today we're gonna have a little sneak peek on what it's like to own a Triumph Spitfire, specifically a Spitfire 1500, which is from, I guess, 74 to 81 or 80, something like that. Anyway, this specific model is a 76, so it has a little bit more beans than the rest of them. Unfortunately, I don't have an exactly perfect OEM stock Spitfire. There's some modifications done to it. I'll go over that and explain what I've done to it, what the previous owner's done to it, what it does to the car, how it performs. And again, in this video, we're gonna show a little bit about some driving. We're gonna show you pretty much everything cost of ownership with this car has been for here in Ontario, Canada, over the last 4 years of my ownership of it. And I'll give you like a rough number of what it would cost you if you weren't doing excessive mods and whatnot with this vehicle. Anyway, yeah, so I'll give you a little breakdown on what it is like to own this car, what's broken down on it, what's commonly, you know, malfunctions and whatnot, what you're gonna look at for wear and tear, how many miles you're realistically gonna drive it each year and whatnot. At least here in Ontario, Canada, we only get maybe 6 months of good driving weather. So unfortunately, I don't get a lot of miles in this car, and with work, I barely drive this thing. I think right now I've put on 784 miles this whole year, which is unfortunate. I used to be able to put around 2,500 a year, but this year has been really like, haven't been taking this car anywhere pretty much. Just driving around the block, going for some rips. I do drive this car really hard. I used to drive it harder, and I'll explain how I split the clutch in half and toasted the transmission and all the other things I've done with this car. You can drift these. I don't recommend it. They are like not the strongest things in the world, but they will handle it. They'll slide out. They weigh about 1,500 pounds. So you're looking at a great overall like roadster, fun car, just like a cruiser. They're cheap to get into for the most part, relatively. I want to say you can get a good one for about 5 grand. That's pretty much what I paid, 5,000 Canadian for this at the time before COVID, when there was the whole hike up. But I think prices are a little bit stable now. They're not as crazy as they were, at least at the beginning of this year and last year, where we were seeing prices around $10,000 for this condition. But now they're around, for, you know, a driver, you're looking at maybe $7,000, 5 to 7, depending on how good of a negotiator you are. You can get it lower. I like to, you know, at least get 25% off. People don't like that about me, but it is what it is.
And is it reliable, and does it make a great first car?
I basically had this as my first car to drive around, and it was all I had to get to work and back. I didn't take it to school because I didn't feel like taking this on the highway. Explain that in a bit, and why you want an overdrive transmission versus this. The gearing in this 4-speed transmission is not the best versus the overdrive, obviously. And there's different gear ratios that you can look at too. But for now, I want to say it is absolutely an amazing, fun first car for the summer. And then you're gonna have to look at something else for the rest of the year. And when you want to go and drive in the rain, when you want to drive this and that. I did drive this in the rain. I drove it in the snow on non-salted roads just to have a little bit of fun. But I don't winter drive this car. That was just a one-time deal, just for fun. No one to slide it around. But you can daily these for sure. They would be great first cars, and they're pretty cheap to maintain. All the parts on these cars are still being manufactured today, and they're pretty much affordable. And you have guys like me that break a lot of these. Basically, I find them going to the scrap yards, and I take them and I split them up, take the parts I want to put on this to upgrade this one. If there's something scratched or damaged, dented, rusted, I'll replace it with used parts. And if not, I'll buy OEM, or not OEM, I'll buy like close to OEM new ones. And I do support a lot of other builds, like as far as like selling parts overseas. I've been selling things to Europe, United States, I don't know, that's pretty much it realistically. Within Canada, I pretty much ship my stuff anywhere that anyone asks. But yeah, I love to help the community and get these things on the road. So one thing you gotta understand with this community is that everyone is really nice about Spitfires. They will help you out. If you can't find something, somebody will find it for you. They'll take time out of their day. So one of the designers of the styling of this vehicle was Michelotti, who was designer of a lot of Ferraris, Maseratis, what else? Alphas, basically a lot of higher end or just European sports cars, right? So you can see there's a lot of cooler styling with this car versus something that's a little bit more performance oriented, like the TR6, which has more straight lines. This has a nice wing to it, a lot more curvier, like front end. The front end, I've actually been told, looks like a Porsche kind of. But I mean, anything with two circular headlights is gonna look like a Porsche pretty much.
Oh, that's nice. Should get that in the video. V6 Mustang with a burnt tip. Nice.
Anyway, speaking of burnt tips, I didn't polish these. So stock is a single pipe coming out to here. I did a little bit of styling to it, and I had a Monza quad exhaust, basically extended about 6 inches out the back, so it kind of like passes the bumper and doesn't get it as dirty, but it does get it pretty dirty, not gonna lie. I did not wipe it down before this video. Probably should have. But yeah, and also they didn't come with a blacked out tail, I guess. I did that to cover up some damage to it, and they are also not in silver. That's not a Spitfire color. That's a color that a previous owner painted it in about the 80s. But yeah, don't mind the damage to it. Also, these are Lotus wheels. They're originally gold. They're powder coated silver, so they have that little styling. They did not have the Spitfire sticker on these. That's just like, you know, extra fun thing somebody added onto it. Other than that, it's a pretty basic little car. Like it's cool. These have like the chrome bumpers on them up to like who the f is that?
I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, these have the chrome bumpers up to I think about 76, and then 77 to 81 they're going to be a rubber, ugly rubber, and just in my opinion, some people like the rubber, but and on the 74s and older, or 73 and older, they will have a shorter, like chopped off overrider. Or I think these are called overrider when they're longer, and underriders when they're shorter. But yeah, and then before that, obviously in the 60s, they're gonna have just all chrome. All right, so moving on to the interior. These seats, this is from an older Spitfire. Also GT6s had these, but this is more of a Mark IV seat, like 72-ish. And an aftermarket steering wheel. This is just a simple little 4-speed transmission. Pull the e-brake up maybe a little bit if I do that. 4-speed transmission. These all came standard, none of them automatic. And they're basically bare bones. The only real like little options that I found for these cars is a map light, which mine does not have, an overdrive transmission, which has a selector switch on the shifter, and a lot of them didn't come with radios, but mine has an aftermarket one currently with subs in the back. Previous owner did that. I'm gonna keep it because I like it. They have heat, so you can drive these into the fall if you like. If you're in a colder climate, this car will be fine. This one has heat. I know some of them don't, but they're not that expensive to basically buy an OEM heater box and run it all together. But what else is there that's interesting about it? I guess they all kind of have, don't mind the wiring mess that's going on right now. This is a work in progress, obviously, but the skinny pedal there, the gas pedal, are always just bare metal. So it looks like it's kind of like not the best, but the throttle response is actually really good and it's a lot of fun. Some switches under the dash that you can see there is just some fog lights and an electric fan, because I switched that from the mechanical. So some of the things you got, stock in the factory, cigarette lighter, you get a temp gauge, that's your light switch in the middle. You got some dummy gauges or some dummy lights over there that don't work on mine. You know, seat belt, EGR, brake, fuel gauge there. In the center frame there, you're gonna have your choke lever, tachometer there on this side will pop over, and then the cool feature on this car is the hazard. It pulls outward and flashes red. You can kind of see it, obviously better at night. And then over here you got your wiper, which you actually have to rotate to turn on and push in to pump a manual windshield wiper fluid. And the dashboard has a lot of nice styling. The fake wood grain, basically. Obviously, because it's an older vehicle, it's gonna have analog gauges. It looks really cool. And the little chrome around the bezels was polished out. They originally come with this year, they're gonna be blacked out, but you just put a little bit of paint thinner on that and it'll take it right down to chrome. But going on from the interior, actually, you can pretty much, a lot of people are worried about height-wise, if you can drive the car. I've had people say they can get in it when they're tall. Some people say they can't. It's a low car, so if you have knee problems, back problems, anything like that, it's not really going to be the best.
How tall are you, Daniel?
I'm only like 5'8".
So you're 5'8", and you fit comfortably.
I fit comfortably, and I have lots of room. I don't know what the tallest person that's been in this car was.
Probably Mike.
How tall is Mike?
6'4".
If you're around 6'4", I'm gonna say it's uncomfortable.
I'm six, almost 6'1", and I fit pretty, and I can drive it.
6'1", you can drive this. 6'4" is you're pushing it. It's a little bit tight, but I mean, it is what it is. It's a little British car. And for trunk space, it's actually pretty good. So I have a full-size spare here. Again, the Lotus wheel. Usually they'll come with just a regular donut spare, which is a full size still. It's the same size as the regular wheels, but they're just so tiny that they look like donuts. I keep a fire extinguisher because I don't trust any of the Lucas wiring, or my own for that matter. And of course a jerry can, because my fuel gauge doesn't work. You know, it's good to actually take the time and make sure all your gauges work properly. But my fuel gauge will read from a quarter tank to half, and between that is where you know full and empty. But sometimes I forget. I have a lot of cars, it is what it is. But yeah, so from here let's go pop the hood and look at what's under the hood, and I'll explain all that. Okay, so this is the 1.5 liter inline 4 that this Spitfire has. A couple mods I've done to it just to make things a lot nicer. We'll start off with hood shocks. I didn't like the original stock folding hood prop. It's kind of just in the way, and kind of one of those things that if you bump into it could fall on you. I've never had that happen. I've never heard of it happening, but it could happen. But anyway, I got these aftermarket shocks, and what they do actually, which is a good benefit too besides safety, is they lift up the hood evenly so that you don't get too many stress cracks. Like you can see over here, there's a lot of stress cracking. But back here in Canada and United States, it would come with a single Stromberg carburetor, but I have these European carburetors on here. I don't know if these are off of a Mini Cooper or whatnot, but the fuel orientation is kind of the wrong way here. So you can see how the fuel rail goes over the engine. It should not. It should come out to the side here and then go to the carbs. So I have a little bit of a fuel boiling issue there. But other than that, it's been pretty reliable. I've never had the engine give me any trouble at all. But just for funsies, you know, pancake chrome filters, heat shield because you need it. And also, one thing you should always do if you're going to convert these, make sure you have a block between your carbs and your head and your intake manifold, because the heat from the intake manifold is going to get soaked up by those carbs right away and your fuel is going to boil, and you don't want that. This is a little Amazon special radiator. It's never let me down. It's been pretty good. It keeps the car nice and cool, and an electric fan over there. I have videos on installing all this stuff if you're interested. This is thermostatically controlled down there, which you can adjust to turn on. And yeah, it is a really lightweight car, and you can see how like thin and small the suspension looks on it, but it's actually pretty good handling. Again, you can drift this car. It has crazy angle. I don't recommend it because it's dangerous, and I don't condone anything like that on the street, of course. But yeah, this engine will make 71 horsepower from the factory with emissions control on it. Currently, mine has fallen off while driving. I would never de-emission a vehicle. I think that's illegal here, but you know, it is what it is. You hit a bump and it all fell off. But yeah, so right now I think we're making a little bit more power. I probably am going to take this to the track at some point and get a number for 0 to 60 and whatnot, or at least a quarter mile. This car is not meant for that. This car is for cruising around this back roads going like 80. That's where it's happy, and you can drive around some tight turns, have some fun, take the rear end out a little bit, but it handles like a little go-kart. I also have headers on this 42-to-1. You can barely see it. There's a video on that installation as well with the whole exhaust. And basically this car is super loud. I don't recommend it because gearing is really short, and basically it's always loud. It was fun, but at some point I've decided that the noise is too much. But it's a fun noise, so it's okay. Braking wise, it's all manual brakes. It's not the best for stopping power, but you can see it's a little bit just rebuilt, old suspension, rebuilt brakes on it. It stops pretty good, but it's nothing crazy. They're tiny little brakes, and of course you got manual steering, so at a stop it's a little bit of work, but when you're moving you don't even realize it. It's fine. So another cool feature about this car is the gas cap setup. One thing I've always done wrong up until last year was how to fold this top properly. So I'll show you how to open it and attach it, and then I'll show you how to collapse it back where you won't damage any of the plastics. So the first step, you have to remove this little tonneau. I don't actually know what it's called, if it's a tonneau or a top cover or what you want to call it. But yeah, you just pop this guy off, and then you can pull this out from underneath, and then you pull the frame up. Don't worry about the noises. It's gonna make noises. So, one thing that a lot of people don't do is when they close this up, is they tuck everything like this, and then fold it down, and this gets crushed inside here. But the way to avoid that is the snaps inside this lining, this rib here, those have to be unsnapped in order to close it. The downside to it, you're gonna have to snap them and unsnap them every time you put the top up and down. So you've got these two latches, and they're basically gonna go in these little holes here. These center holes are for your hard top. I'm not gonna film the hard top video because I don't have it with me here in the city. Moving the whole car to get this thing in place. When the top is warmer, it's a lot easier to get it in place. But you can also just sit here in the seat and just push it forward like that, and then that'll lock it into place. So that's one side. You do that to the other side, and inside here, if you want to get underneath, I don't know. Oops. There are these little snaps, and you snap them in place. A little weird with one hand. And then on the side, over here, oh, you want to hold it here? Sorry.
Nope.
Over here, you just simply pop these all down into place, all the way through on both sides, and you got your top up. But now, just to put it away, you simply pull from here, and you make sure that all of this stays out, just like that. That was very good. So with that pushed down, now what you can do is flop these guys inward like this, and these can slide all the way down behind the seats, just like that. So you can see now that it doesn't crinkle this or warp it and cause it to turn yellow and all other colors you don't want this thing to turn. And I also have a jacket stuff behind here, so it's really tight. But yeah, then you just pop this guy back up and you tuck her in place. So some things that are gonna go wrong with this car, which is kind of inevitable, is your CV joints from the rear, from those axles. Those usually make a lot of noise and they'll wear out pretty often. Wheel bearings, you always want to just go through those. As with any other old car, you just clean those up. The weak links on these cars is going to be the transmissions. The transmissions are not very strong and they don't hold up to a lot of crazy driving, but they're pretty cheap. They're about $125 on average to buy one in good condition. I picked one up for $100 the other day with about 27,000 miles on it in good condition. Engine wise, I haven't had any issues with it. Some people say they have overheating issues, but that's something deeper. You have to go and clean out your cooling system and make sure everything's working thermostatically and all that whatnot. Make sure your coolant is updated and clean, and test it once in a while. I do my oil changes every 1,000 on this car, but that's kind of unnecessary. But it ends up being just because of the time. I end up wanting to change it because I drive it a little bit harder and whatnot, and I drive this thing once a month, maybe at the most. So so when I drive it, it's really hard driving, but I barely drive it. So it's like a little balance in between where I want to change the oil and make sure it's all clean because I beat on it. Rust is pretty common on these cars. You'll lose your floors, and I'll show you some other areas that are always going to have rust. Here up in Canada, right there, you can kind of see mine's rotten. Over there, along this arch, usually has a lot of rust. Some filler you'll find in a lot of places. The bottom of the doors will rust, like that. This thing is pretty rotten. And quarters. Quarters are always gone right back here. This one's solid for whatever reason. Floors usually rot in the passenger front, but in the footwell. And the frames will rot in the very back here, right where the wheels kick up the dirt and whatnot. That'll rot pretty fast. but this one has a solid frame, so I'm lucky. You can get away with getting some rust-free cars, but you gotta check under every little orifice and crevice and stuff like that, because they do rust and people like to cover things up with filler. But luckily this car's fine, doesn't have too much. I suspect this whole quarter panel and the other one was replaced because from the factory they would have a reflector over here, just like that one. But the OEM or the replacement quarter panels usually don't have the cutout for that. So that is an indicator that perhaps these quarters were replaced at one point, just like the hood on this one was replaced as well. As far as cost of ownership, you can pick them up for about $5,000. And to get mine on the road and need a little bit of work, I overpaid and paid a shop $1,500 to do stuff that I could do myself for about $200. But things you just want to do, go over the brakes, make sure you flush everything, new fluid in the transmission, the diff, and the engine. Obviously the engine you're going to want to change a lot more than the others, but just simple things like that. I've had the brake master cylinder go out while driving this car, and I've had the clutch split in half from basically rev dumping it at I think 5,500 RPM. And other than that, nothing else has really failed me. I've got U-joints going out that I'm going to replace and make a video on that over the winter. And yeah, a lot of these door pins do get saggy over time, and what you can do is, instead of buying new ones for $140 a piece pretty much, or I think actually they're like 60 something dollars a piece, but you have to do 2 on each side. What I would like to do is just get used ones from the parts yard, and you can put a new pin in there and rebuild them that way versus buying a whole new assembly. But they are disc in the front, drum in the rear, and that's never really been an issue because it is a pretty light car. Again, the braking is not the best, but comparing it to modern cars, obviously it's a little bit of an oldie boy, but it's going to be something that you can upgrade if you want. I kind of kept them stock. These ugly bumpers in the back, I know everyone wants to take them off and just keep the interior bar there on it, but it's honestly saved me in an accident. 3 days after I got this car on the road, I got rear-ended really lightly by somebody who wasn't paying attention, and it did more damage to their car than mine. Actually, nothing even happened to the Spitfire. But yeah, cost of ownership wise on this car, I want to say the first year I had it, I was at $5 grand to buy it, and after registering it and doing all the BS paperwork and stuff, again I paid $1,500 for stuff I didn't really need to. I bought a new top for it for about $600 and a few other little doodads. I was into this car the first year driving on the road for about $8,000, which seems like pretty high for what it is, but again, this car needed a little bit of work. And things that cost money that you don't really need, like the exhaust, cost me about $2 grand to do. Brakes were about $500 all around. I think they were around there. All this engine stuff, you can get deals on these carburetors. Again, somebody got a deal and they put the wrong carbs on there. These are HS2s, they're supposed to be HS4s for this car. I'm gonna switch that eventually and reroute the fuel line properly. Stuff like that, $250 maybe. Radiator, $100. Cooling fan costs a little bit of money. I think that was about $400 for all said and done with everything like that. And what else have I done? The headers, that's part of the exhaust system. The header alone was $500. The top will be like $600. That's something that's going to be often changed, or oftentimes you'll change it when you first buy it, but you'll never really have to change it to the ownership of it. The clutch is pretty cheap. I think I paid $100 for the whole clutch and the
talked about the electric fan, right?
Yeah, the clutch and stuff. The heat shield was about $20 I paid for it. One thing that this is missing are there's supposed to be these cardboard runners here, like just like shields, ducting, and it helps with cooling and airflow direction. I'm gonna eventually put that on, but right now it's off because it looks pretty. And yeah, nothing too crazy with this car. So as far as driving goes, the car is it's not too quick, but it's also not too slow. It's a good like in between little car. Like you can keep up with traffic. I personally wouldn't go on the highway with this car just because the gearing isn't the best with the 4-speed. When you're at about 100 kilometers an hour, you're over 3,000 RPM, and with it almost straight pipe exhaust, it's not the best. But with a stock exhaust, you can do it. I've driven on the highway before. The only issues I've had with driving on the highway before was leaking engine oil onto the header. That problem's been fixed since then. So I would say you could definitely highway this car, but I wouldn't go too much because it's just kind of annoying, to be honest, driving it with a little bit of drone. As far as driving in the cold and rain, I found a little bit of leaks with the air and a little bit of water coming through the top. But I think that's mostly an issue with me installing the top a little bit off-centered. So it was leaking a little bit of water, and of course air is going to get in with this off top, I think, no matter what. But if you get a hard top, it'll solve these issues almost completely, as long as you have proper weather stripping. Fuel economy is also okay with these cars. They're pretty decent driving. If you have music on and whatnot, you can still have conversations with people. And if you're lucky, if you play your cards right and you maintain it, you won't be stuck on the side of the road. But anyway, I just parked here, don't worry, it's not broken down. But anyway, take care, comb your hair. Hopefully you'll be able to find a nice Spitfire, and hopefully you choose to take one. They're great cars.